Yeah, this is a podcast of Nathan, Nat and Shaun.
Let's go!
Nathan, Nat and Shaun.
Wow.
Be upstanding, please. We have the Prime Minister of the country in the House, Scott Morrison. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, Prime Minister.
Talk to you in the West.
Hello, ScoMo.
We're very well at the moment. We have learned a few things over the last couple of days, and that is people like to keep text messages in Canberra, as it turns out, and your wife does all the shopping.
Well, I suppose practically neither of those are particularly true here at where I am today over here in Sydney. But look, what really matters is what's going on in other people's kitchens and what's going on in other people's living rooms and their workplaces. And what I'm pleased about is we're getting people into jobs. I mean, unemployment, we're looking at getting down to below 4%, having a 3 in front of it. We haven't seen that in 50 years. We've got 220,000 trade apprentices in training. We haven't seen that since records began in 1963. So the economy is heading in the right direction, and the West's economy is heading in the right direction, and that's what we need to keep doing and working together to achieve that as we push through this pandemic.
Hey, Scott, so I just want to go back to those texts and just... when he was reading out those texts about you being a psycho and a horrible, horrible person, would you have preferred for him to have handed the phone to you so you could have read them out like Jimmy Kimmel's mean tweets? So at least you could have put a fun voice on.
I could pull up my Facebook page now. We could run through it. It goes with the gig.
Yeah.
But
Yes.
look, anonymous things read out at the press club by people probably trying to distract attention from themselves is really, that sometimes happens down in Canberra, but it doesn't make any difference to what's going on with people in their lives, and that's where I'm focused. So when those things happen, they happen, and so long as they apply the same blowtorch to my opponent, and so that's really the test for them. I mean, that's fair. I mean, I step up to it every day. I mean, that's another day in the office for me. It comes with the territory. You cop the flack and the criticism. People will say what they'll say, but, anonymous sledging, I don't pay much attention to.
Sorry, and on that, from the milk and the bread prices, are you now carrying around a Woolworths catalogue with you at all times?
Well, it'd have to be pretty thick because, how many different types of milk do you have in your fridge? If you've got kids, you've got all different types, and then, some even drink milk, don't even have dairy in it, milking almonds.
Almonds. I want to see that process.
I'm guessing you don't have a future as a contestant on The Price is Right, though. Would that be fair?
No, but I do know Larry, a good mate of mine. When Larry went to school together over here in Sydney, he's a good guy.
Okay, one question I had about the bread thing, and that is I'm wondering if you're cutting down on the carbs. Is that one of the reasons why you probably didn't have the price?
Well, seriously, it's really important when you're doing the sort of jobs that I do, and anyone in a stressful job, you've got to sort of look after yourself because that helps you make good decisions, and that's been tough, I think, for a lot of people during the pandemic. I mean, I try and do it by swimming as much as I can and doing those sorts of things, and that's why I cook as well. It sort of gives you a bit of your brain a time to reset and refresh. That's really important, and a lot of big decisions we've had to make in this pandemic, just like Mark McGowans has had to there, and we've worked closely together. We're actually working very closely together at the moment on the what's occurred with the washout of the rail line and with everything coming across from South Australia, and I appreciate working together with him and our governments. Barnaby Joyce has been doing a terrific job on that as well. We're getting through that. It's you just a lot of problem solving and just people focusing on the issue, and there's no politics there. We're both doing our job. And for Mark and I, that's pretty much how the pandemic has been. I mean, we've had the odd disagreement now and then, but to be honest, we've just kept working the problem, and we're looking forward to Western Australia getting to a point where, it does open up, but it's got to be done safely, and I agree with Mark on that, and the hospital system's got to be ready, and I know he's focused on that. And we've learned a lot of lessons over here on the east about how Omicron works, and I'm sure at every National Cabinet meeting he's been paying close attention to that to ensure Western Australia can avoid some of the impacts that we've had over here. And
so, are you saying you're backing the decisions that he's made? Are you saying you back the decisions that he's made with changing the date, cancelling the Feb 5 opening?
Oh, I understand that. I mean, because Omicron is it's been a beast. It changed everything. It was like a completely different virus. And one of the key lessons we've had over here on the East Coast is the rules that you had for managing Delta, completely different. So one of the things that sort of crushed us here early in December and, affected things like supply chains and food on shelves and things like that were the rules around close contacts and all. And so we had to change a lot of that very quickly because if you don't, and you're shutting down schools and you're shutting down warehouse distribution centres and truck drivers and mines and, well, your economy and your society just grinds to a halt. And so Omicron's different to Delta. And so I'm sure Mark has been watching that closely, and it means that, if the rules are too tight and too prescriptive, they can actually become the problem, and they can become worse than the virus itself.
I've got a question for you. Staying with the virus, and the opposition have obviously said that you've been way too slow in acting on all these things. We're talking about rapid antigen tests. Nathan, who I work with here, he's been saying, what about the price of them, Nathan's one thing that you've been talking about lately.
They should be about $5.
Could have you done the whole thing a lot better and faster? That's what the opposition is saying.
Well, armchair critics, they're a bit like the Monday morning coach after the game on the weekend. They've always got plenty of thoughts after the fact, but you'd never want him actually running the team, would you? And that's how pretty much I see that. They're always wise in hindsight. But when you're Prime Minister or Premier, you make the decisions in real time on the best information you have. Now, I remind everyone that rapid antigen tests were still illegal in Western Australia.
But also at that stage, when they were illegal, we didn't have a need for them because there were no cases.
But that is the point. That is exactly the point. In the eastern states, the need was not there either until Omicron hit. The rules in the East Coast states by premiers there and by our own Commonwealth health advisors was that PCR tests were the gold standard and should be used for testing, and all of them were free. Rapid antigen tests are not as reliable as PCR tests, and cheers to the South Australian government because they've kept doing the PCR tests. They've been able to manage it that way, but with the rapid escalation of cases that occurred over December, January, I mean, we've only had this virus for the last 2 months with Omicron. That's what I mean by it completely changed. It was not the health advice to use rapid antigen testing, and they only got approved in early November. We got all the premiers together a few days later, and we agreed that the Commonwealth would go and get them if we needed them for aged care facilities, which we did. And we've already had 8 million out into those, and there was 2 million going into them in December. And the states and territories would be the ones who would go and get the ones for public use at their testing centres. Now, that's what we agreed in November, and we paid 50-50 of all of the costs. And so tests that are going out to schools here where I am today in New South Wales, they're being done by the state government. They've been procured by the state government, but we're paying for half the cost. So things are always a lot more complicated than they appear at first analysis. But, Labor Party and oppositions are going to try and exploit that. There's an election on this year, so rather than working with us,
by the way?
They get up every day and work
When are you going to call it?
Well, it's due in the middle of May.
Okay.
Yeah. But are you going to set when are you going to set the date?
Well, we'll set it out from about 5 weeks out from when the election's called for. That's the normal process.
All right, so May 14th.
But we've got a budget at the end of March.
Yeah.
Hey,
and that's our keen focus right now.
Yeah. Now, Scott, personally, it was really interesting. So when we posted on our socials yesterday that you were going to be coming on, my phone personally melted down. I got so many DMs and stuff like that. Now, it's weird because when we say we've got Mark McGowan on, we had him on earlier in this week. The messages and the calls I received, they're basically about 50-50s in support of him right now. They're 50, because of the some people are upset about the mandate, some people are upset about the border closure, but a lot of people are pretty
very
much
supportive. Yeah,
very supportive as well. 100%, I lie to you not, of the calls and messages and notifications I received for you were with the anger and mistrust that people feel towards you, ranging from the vaccine rollout, the response to women's safety issues, the early support of Clive Palmer's legal actions against WA, the blind support of New South Wales when they didn't go into lockdown early enough and we had that massive COVID outbreak. And while that was happening, it seemed to be that you were dissing WA's strong border safety measures. So to those people, what can you say to turn their anger, mistrust and dissatisfaction about you around? Because it's really quite strong.
Well, look, I'm looking forward to being able to have that opportunity in Western Australia. It's obviously very difficult when we're caught on this side of the country. But just let me pick up a couple of points that you've raised there. First of all, on the court case, we shouldn't have gone into that court case, and that's why I changed the decision. What normally happens in a situation where there's a court case of that nature, the High Court expects the Commonwealth Government to put the position that we put. That's what you normally do, and that's the normal procedure. And that's the procedure that was followed by the Attorney-General at the time. But what was clear is that the pandemic was different. And after some discussions between Mark McGowan and I pulled us out. So, we're talking about things that we would have done differently. I would have done that differently.
Okay.
And it wasn't about Clive Palmer or anything. That's just the Labor Party trying to whip that up. That has nothing to do with Clive Palmer. This was just about us showing respect for the High Court and the normal process that you would have followed. But one thing we've learnt through the pandemic is the pandemic often changes the normal rules. And that was quite much earlier on. Now, when it comes to the borders, I've always respected Mark McGowan's views on the borders. And particularly as the pandemic went on, the experience of the pandemic was different in all states and territories. And it was all the same at the start. We're all staring into the same abyss. The JobKeeper was given in Western Australia just like it was in New South Wales, the income support, all of those things. And as time has gone on, the states have had different experiences. And I've always respected that about Western Australia. That's why I respected Western Australia when it came to the GST. I mean, people remember one of the reasons that Western Australia is so well set up with their revenue at the moment to deal with this and get their hospitals ready is I was the one as Treasurer and Prime Minister who actually ensured that GST deal was put in place. And I had to take on the eastern and southern states to do it. And in my own state to do it. And I advocated the case for Western Australia. So I've got form in standing up for Western Australia.
But it did seem at the time that you were really hardcore against the closing of the borders. In my memory and what we saw on the news, you were thinking that, that was something you didn't agree with at the time, I'm pretty sure.
Because we were doing the same thing as Tasmania, and you weren't even discussing Tasmania, but yet we're slagging off.
I talked about Tasmania, I talked about South Australia, I talked about Queensland, I talked about many states. And borders was a tricky issue, but I think it was the right call ultimately. How they've been administered has been different in different states and territories, and that's had some really terrible personal impacts on people, which I'm sure many of your listeners would agree with. But pandemics are tough, and you don't get everything right.
Yeah.
And I think Australia. But let's just take it back to first principles, though. What were we trying to do as we faced this terrible pandemic, which was just causing absolute chaos everywhere around the world? And there's no guidebook. We're trying to save lives and we're trying to save livelihoods. We've saved 40,000 lives because of the response that we've dealt with at both a national level and at a state level. And Western Australia has done really well. We've saved our economy. We have the lowest unemployment rate we've seen for a long time, and particularly for young people, as I said at the start. Our economy is stronger than most advanced economies in the world, and we're going to keep it that way. And we have one of the highest vaccination rates in the world. We had some problems at the start. I sent the military in to fix it up, and we said at the start of the year that we hoped that everyone would have the opportunity to get a vaccination by October. That's what we said in January of last year.
Yeah.
Hello?
Their people cut him off.
Hey, we've heard enough. They're like, mate, you said this before.
That wasn't us. And we weren't asking the question. He was speaking, and they cut him off.
All right.
There we go.
And that was the Prime Minister, everybody. What a pizza.
Nathan, Nat and Shaun is a Nova podcast. For more great comedy shows like this, head to novapodcasts.com.au.